Wouldn't we all like to learn more about longevity? Not only how to live a longer life, but how to live a productive, fulfilling, pain-free life while living out our dreams, our desires, and all of our desired adventures. Well, stay tuned because today's guest will share her experience, her knowledge, and practical tips for being always ageless at any age. You're going to take away strategic approach and practical tips to how you can make sure your long-term goals are met. Welcome to Always Ageless with Valerie V, where we empower you, educate you, and give you the energy to live life at your fullest at any age. And today we are thrilled to welcome our new guest, Dr. Karina Loyo, PhD. She's a dedicated longevity planner, and she's going to tell us what that is, and a senior home coach who specializes in enhancing health span, protecting assets, and facilitating aging in place for seniors. With a compassionate approach, she's made a significant impact on the lives of so many around her. She's helped them navigate the complexities of aging with confidence and grace. I admire her because she's an ongoing learner. We have one of those in our family. My husband is. She's an accomplished author with her new book coming out, which we'll talk about. She's written numerous articles for the International Animal Health Journal. In addition to her expertise as a speaker, a consultant, a facilitator, she's also a voiceover artist, which is a twist I'll have to ask her about. She's also a realtor, but her educational background in health promotion provides her with the essential skills to advocate and be an advocate for seniors and senior wellness. She resides in Georgetown, Texas, and Dr. Loyo has twin girls, which I didn't realize. She's also a bit of an adventure person herself, having recently completed a swim competition. So we're going to dive into, no pun intended, an exciting conversation with Karina Loyo, PhD, exploring her insights on aging, health, and the importance of planning for a fulfilling future. Welcome, Dr. Karina Loyo.
Thank you, Valerie. I am so excited to be here with you and your audience.
Well, we're excited to have you. I know that from all of your learning, and I admire so much that you do has to do with an education program, something you're learning, some data that you're creating or developing. Tell us, first of all, what is your PhD in?
So my doctorate is in health promotion and gerontology. And what that means is I specialize in program planning, implementation, promotion, and evaluation. A lot of it is related to health behavior modification. And then gerontology is the biology, physiology, and psychology of aging. And so basically, I guess I wanted to learn how to live the happiest, healthiest life I possibly can and be able to get other people to live that as well. I've had the opportunity to see and be with successful agers. They're the ones that are able to run circles around you and me. And I'd love to be one of those, frankly. And I've also been around folks who have had, lower quality of life and a larger time frame of disability at their end of life. And so I desire to help everybody become the healthiest possible so that part of their life is as short as possible.
First of all, let's take a minute and ask you to explain gerontology. I actually learned a little bit more about it this week myself, and I was surprised because a lot of people think that it's something to do with medicine or being a doctor. So tell us about that.
So gerontology is more the study of aging. And so to study aging, you study various aspects of aging. So it would be like the psychology of aging. What do people think and feel as they go through the aging process? The physiology of aging. What is actually happening in the body? The physical changes that occur due to the aging process. Our cells get older, our organs get older, and those have implications on our overall health. And then it's also the physiology, so the movement of how we move and how we change. So there's the biomechanics. So really, it is all aspects of aging from a more psychosocial point of view. So also understanding that, aging doesn't happen in a test tube. We live in this world. And so everything around us is going to impact us, right? from the food chain, whether we're eating food that has a lot of pesticides in it or not. That has a certain impact on it. Whether we live, we call it the built environment around us. So everything that has been constructed, whether it's sidewalks or buildings, or if you live close to McDonald's and fast food, those types of places you tend to eat less healthy. But if you're closer to a park, you're more likely to go out and exercise. So all of these things around you is an ecosystem that either support your aging process and your health or they don't.
And that has something to do also, not to get off the subject, but what I recently saw a program, I think it's called the Blue Zones.
Mm-hmm.
Is that correct? Which has to do with
Yes.
aging and the environment around you and the incredible impact that's had on people in those communities throughout the world.
Right. And the truth of the matter is culture also has an impact, right? And what you expect. Like, for example, somebody that grew up with their grandparents in a wheelchair, that's their concept of aging, right? Aging is disability and you end up in a wheelchair. But then there's other people who, like my grandfather at 80 years old, was at the golf course at 6:30 in the morning. He was the first one to tee off. 80 years old. So people can be really physically active and very engaged in life, even into their 80s and 90s. In fact, a lot of people don't know, but a lot of the good textbooks and advances that have happened in science are happening with scientists and people who are 70 and 80 years old.
Yes,
Grandma Moses was an artist in her older ages, right? In her 70s and 80s.
absolutely. And actually for those for our listeners and our viewers, that's one of the things that I had as a goal of our show is that we'll have at least once a month or every 5 weeks, we'll have someone who I call our hero, someone who is an older person who's done something really amazing in their life in their older years, either started a business or wrote a book, or last week we had on our show a lady from Florida who started writing plays about seniors and their living situations at 70, and she's 78 and still writing plays called
Uh-huh.
Plays for with a Purpose, and her group is called SAGES, which is Senior Acting
Mhm.
Guild, which is interesting. So we've had a lot of fun with that. And yeah, absolutely. And I think that that's always been the case, but I think more so there's more of them and we're more aware of it, I think.
Yeah, I think so. I think that, all the technology that we have today with, YouTube videos and things like that, where you can go into a search for athletes over the age of 75 and 80, and you will see people who hold world records for everything, right? Swimming, tennis, basketball, gymnastics. There's a 90-year-old gymnast, and you're like, oh my gosh, look at her move.
I know a little lady. I've seen her. And I don't know whether you're aware of this, but actually they have senior Olympics
Mm-hmm.
and they
Yes.
actually take place, I think, in some place in Oklahoma or somewhere in the fall. So it would be fun to watch those.
Yeah, apparently I'm getting close to being able to qualify.
Oh, are you? I don't know. I didn't, I
Yeah,
don't know.
age-wise,
Yeah, I don't know what it is, but I thought it was fascinating to see that. So we
it
know
is.
you love learning, you love data, you love science, you're so good at it. And so what is your inspiration for this? What happened in your life that caused you to want to be a constant learner?
Honestly, I had amazing grandparents and I
Oh,
just admired them. They had just like such a passion for living, and especially my grandparents here in the US. So I grew up in Mexico City
oh,
and here in the United States. My dad was Mexican, my mom was American, so I got the best of both worlds.
yeah.
And when I finished high school, my grandparents here in the States needed help. And the whole family was living in Mexico. My mom, I'm the oldest of four children, so she couldn't come and, help out, which normally it is, the daughter's job, I guess, or unofficial job to help take care of the parents. Well, she wasn't able to do it, but I was done with the traffic in Mexico. So I was more than happy to get out of there. And I say that because it used to take me 15 minutes to get to school in the morning, but on the way home, it was 2 hours, the same
Oh,
trip. Okay.
um,
So I was done with traffic.
um,
And so I came to live in San Marcos, Texas with my grandparents. I came because my grandmother had Alzheimer's and my grandfather was starting to need some help with her. And so it was a win-win situation where I could go to college. They lived about 4 blocks from the college, so I could walk there. And so I came to just be a little bit of a help to them, kind of, do things like help her take baths and things that were a little bit more intimate that he wasn't as comfortable with anymore. And then shortly after I got here, so that was in August, and by October, he has a stroke. And 3 days later, I turned 19. So,
Oh,
yes. So I came to have the college experience, help them out. And then all of a sudden, I found myself as a caregiver to both of them. Yeah, he was in a wheelchair after a stroke, had a speech impediment, and I had to be the primary person that was helping. Now, I did have some help. We had a person that we hired to come in a few hours every day to give us a hand. But, I just love the knowledge and the experiences that they had, and the wisdom. And so I've always been drawn to older adults. I guess as a kid in Mexico, I'm 5'9". Everybody was 5 foot nothing. So I always felt out of place. And
oh,
so yeah. So coming here and being with the older people, I felt like that was my tribe and I could associate with them. And so
oh.
that's where it all began, was with
And,
that.
and your dad also influenced you, but he wanted you to be a veterinarian. So how did he,
Yes.
yeah, how did he take the news when you let him know that wasn't your plan?
Oh, he was really upset. He was really upset because not only did I not want to be a veterinarian, but my bachelor's is in theater arts.
Oh
So I
my
didn't even,
goodness. Oh, you
yeah,
girl after my heart. Yeah.
so I didn't even pick a career that was like, in his minds, a real career. It was, he's like, I don't get it. Why would you want to do that? And I'm like, well, believe it or not, I was extremely shy as a kid. And I knew I had to get over my fear of public speaking because I knew that somehow I was going to end up in a situation which this was going to be a huge part of my life. And so I knew I had to get over it. And so I decided, well, if I study theater and I'm on the directing side, that's going to help with part of that. And
Sure.
then the other side of it was that when you study theater, you learn so many things because putting on a play, it's like running a whole business. I mean, you're hiring the actors, you're casting them, so there's a whole bunch of human resources happening there. And then from there, you're doing the marketing and you're project
Sure.
planning it and on and on. And so it was
You
really
have to get an
teaching
audience.
me, yeah, teaching me the skills of being a good businesswoman. And even though it was theater and it didn't seem like it was practical, it was very hands-on practical for running a business.
And so were you an actress? Did you act? Did you direct?
I was mainly a stage manager and I was
Okay,
an
well, that's
assistant
right.
director, but I did act on main stage once. I was an aunt on drugs.
Oh, well, okay. Well, we're glad you're not.
We were right. I was doing a children's play, and so was an anti-drug play, and I was the main character who happened to be this aunt who was taking, yeah, drugs, and so it was all about why he shouldn't do drugs.
Yes, well, we're glad that you did. We're
Yeah.
glad. We're glad that you're with us today.
Yes, me
Tell us,
too.
so explain to us, what does health span mean? And why is it just as important as lifespan for seniors? And what
Okay.
practical steps can seniors take to enhance their health span?
Okay. Well, I'll start with this. Lifespan is the length of one's life, right? And the longer the people live, the better, at least according to most.
We think
But
so.
really,
Yes, we hope
we
so.
think so, right? That's what we have been
That's the
taught to,
plan.
to believe, right? But the truth of the matter is a much better life is dependent on the quality of that life. So if you get to live 10 years more, but those 10 years are in a wheelchair, that's not very high quality of life. But if you get to live those 10 years and you can still go out and play pickleball and go see your friends, and you only spent maybe the last 2 months of your life with more limited mobility, well, that is a much better lifestyle. So that's what we refer to as health span. Health span being the longest time we can spread your healthy years to. And so our goal as health promotion experts is to try to get you to adopt the healthy behaviors that are going to lead you to have the longest, healthiest portion of your life possible. Of course, certainly there are genes and there are things that, we cannot control. But for those things that we can control, we are making choices every day. And so what we try to do is help people understand. Well, here's the reality. The reality is we all know exercise is good for us, right? We all know healthy eating is good for us.
That's what
We
they
know
tell
it,
us. Yes.
but we don't necessarily do it,
No, we don't.
right? I mean, that's the reality. And so it's the beliefs that we have and the behaviors and the habits that we have that are causing us not to make that a priority or not to make those healthier choices.
Mhm.
And so what I studied was that psychology of, okay, where do those beliefs and behaviors come from? Well, the behaviors comes from the beliefs that we have or from the habits that we were surrounded with as we grew up. So for example, I grew up in a Mexican family. We ate a lot more rice and beans and tortillas, so more carbohydrates. Somebody else might have grown up in a vegan family where they're going to eat a lot more vegetables. I mean, that's just the environment. And it's not necessarily that, your parents failed you because they didn't. They were just doing culturally what they were taught to do. Because if you go back and look at what their parents did, that's what they did.
I
And
mean, I
so,
grew up in the Midwest and we had church potlucks and we always had dessert.
exactly.
Always had dessert.
Yes. And so when we try to convince people to all of a sudden completely forget all that stuff and go change their lifestyle, basically night and day, 180 degrees, it never works. And it doesn't work because we have not taken the incremental steps to examine, well, where did you learn this? And if I'm going to change your whole way of eating, that's probably not the right thing to do. But if I tweak it just a little bit and say, okay, fine, this is what you eat. Okay, let's focus on eating the vegetables first because they're the lower calorie ones.
Okay.
And then you can eat your protein and finally your carbohydrates. So if we change just simply the order of in which you eat things, you're more likely to feel full before you get to eating all the carbohydrates or the higher concentrated calorie portion of your meal. And that in itself
Interesting.
produces a weight loss, right?
There you
Or at
go.
least a stabilization of that. Or when it comes to exercise, a lot of people are like, oh, I'm too tired to exercise at the end of the day. Okay. Well, what's going on there? I have a whole bunch of theories on that one. So you may have to bear with me. But most of us work outside of the home, right?
Yeah.
And most of us will get tired, really tired on the way home. And most of us will commute about 20 to 40 minutes,
About.
right? About. Okay. Well, one of the things that a lot of people don't realize is that the angle of your chair in your vehicle is actually causing you to become more tired and more stressed.
Really?
Yes.
No,
Yes, because
I've never heard that before.
okay. Well, let me explain. And I
Please.
wish I could be seen completely. Okay, let's just imagine this. You have a sports car, right? And that sports car is really cool. And you're like leaning your chair backwards, right? And I'm going to try to turn to the side and maybe for those that are being able to see this. Um,
Okay. We can see.
so, so I'm to the side. And so I'm leaning back, right? And at first I'm leaning back and I have my arms stretched out. I'm really cool. And I'm looking over my steering wheel.
Mhm.
But what happens is that's really good at the first few minutes. But eventually, as I start driving, you see my head starts moving forward.
Yes.
And as my head starts moving forward, my shoulders start moving upwards. And the other thing that you probably can't see is that my rib cage starts tipping into my back. And so as that happens, what is occurred is I am compressing my lung space. So I've closed my lung space,
Um,
I've taken my head and I've moved it forward. So now this head that's supposed to balance on our spine and not weigh anything to the muscles that turn it left and right, now all the muscles in the back of our neck and our shoulders are working hard to keep that head balanced forward because it's no longer balanced on the um, on the vertebrae. It is now being kept up by the muscles. And so this tension builds up in our neck and shoulders. And by the time we get home 20, 30 minutes later, we are so tired and we're stressed. And then of course, the guy in front of us made us mad. And, we got stressed out
Sometimes
with
he
the
does.
traffic and it just kind of accumulates, right? But the reality is it was our physiological position that caused us to end up tired. We really, if we then, okay, then the next thing that most people do is they go and they sit in the recliner. And the recliner, right, does kind of the same thing. It still compresses your lung area. A much better thing to do when you get home is actually to take and stretch your arms up over your head and take a really big deep breath. And when you do that, what you've done is you've opened up your rib cage, you're getting oxygen into all parts of your body. And if you just did that for 2 minutes, that breathing with your arms up in the air, or even, out to the side, if you can't get them up in the air, just put them out to the side and let yourself breathe in and breathe deep and relax your shoulders as you're doing this. You're going to find that all of a sudden you're no longer tired. You're no longer stressed. Now you
Really?
have energy to go out and do things. Yes. And the thing that is the most crazy is that even though you're as tired as you are, if you were to get out there and start doing the exercises within 3 minutes, you would feel a change in your energy level because you're moving now your body and putting oxygen to every cell in your body in the way that it was meant to happen.
Well, there you go. Our listeners and our viewers, now we know how we have to do it. Go home and be in the mood to exercise. So what about, and just to take a little segue here, what if we stopped at the gym on the way home? Would that be?
Oh, that would be even better, right?
That would
Because
solve the problem, right?
yeah, that
And
is
I don't, so
definitely
I'm not saying I do, but just was asking.
yeah, but that is definitely the other thing that is the best thing to do is stop. Okay, so some tips. If you stop on the way home and exercise, either you go to the gym or you go to the park or you meet up with friends. That's another thing. Meet up with a friend. Why is that important? You have an accountability partner. So they're
Yeah,
going to encourage you. And
absolutely.
it's more
Sure.
fun to be with friends than to,
Oh, it is. Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah. I
So,
don't like to walk by myself. I'll walk with somebody,
yes.
but I don't really like to walk by myself.
Yeah, exactly. I don't like to walk by myself. And if I don't have somebody with me walking, I will call somebody and tell them they're walking with me.
Oh, that's great. Well, I wish I lived closer. I would love to walk with you.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, we can always talk and walk.
We could do that. Yeah, and I probably would do that.
Yeah.
Well, we have a 6 o'clock call in the morning. At least I do. Right.
Yes,
But I would rather be talking to somebody during the call. So
absolutely. And then another thing that a lot of people will do is they'll be tired when they get home. And so then when they decide what they want to cook, they just put something together that's easy and usually higher in carbohydrates. And so one of the things that I recommend for people is take an apple to work with you and then eat that apple on the way home. So what
okay.
happens is because you're eating the apple on the way home, you're getting a little bit of energy. Your body is getting the message that you have plenty access to food. And so by the time you get home, you've gotten some fibers, you've gotten some good nutrients, and you're no longer starved. You're now able to think, oh, well, what do I want to eat? And when you do sit down and eat, you're going to eat less because you're already feeling satisfied.
Yeah. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's true. That is true. That is true. And an apple's pretty healthy, so
An apple, there's other things. You can
better
use
than grabbing
carrots,
a snack.
celery.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah,
better
you
than
want
grabbing
some,
some.
yeah, I would say you want a live snack. And by live snack, I mean like the carrots, the celery, something that has not been processed a whole lot. Now, I do like protein drinks. I think protein drinks that are low in calories really do have a place in the health side. And that has to do with the way that protein and carbohydrates are processed within the body. And so a lot of people will get themselves into a situation of having a lot of cravings. And these cravings are because we're eating maybe high carbohydrate meals and maybe we've messed up kind of our gut biome and things like that. And so one of the ways to help reset all of that is by adding protein to every time you eat. And so that's where the protein shakes end up being a really good thing is if you need additional protein or just even need to rebalance like this craving cycle is integrating these protein shakes, 2 or 3 a day, even though it may be adding a few calories to what it is that you eat. In about 3 days, it's all it takes to get rid of those cravings because your blood sugar will spike every time you eat carbohydrates. And if you don't have enough protein to then be able to bring the insulin down, then your body, it starts sending a message to your brain saying you're hungry because
Yep, it does.
you've got to balance the insulin out. And so if when you get that message, you're like, oh my gosh, I got to eat something now. And if what you reach for, carbohydrate. And most people don't reach for protein. But if you reach for that protein lasts longer. So it will help that insulin come down slowly and you won't get that sudden emergency in your brain saying, oh my God, I'm hungry because there's insulin, too much insulin, right? And so over about a 3-day period, it helps rebalance that. It's
Oh,
really fascinating to look at
there
those
you
studies.
go to our listeners and viewers. There's the trick. And do you recommend for protein drinks? What should that be?
I think there's several of them that I have tried and I liked. It really is a matter of, your
So
preference.
kind of the
I tend,
kinds you buy at Costco, these little jars of,
yeah, the
was it
little
Fairlife
jars.
or something like that? I think they're at Costco, they're Fairlife or something.
Yeah, there's a wide variety of them. I personally like the clear ones. They don't tend to be as chalky as some of the others.
Mhm.
I suggest looking for the lower calorie ones. I know
I know.
Atkins has some Advantage Edge ones,
Okay,
and they're like 110 calories per drink. A
okay.
lot of them are about 160, some are about 230. I would go towards the ones that are lower in calories and have the higher protein value.
Well, that sounds like a great idea.
Yeah,
Karina, you are launching any day a new book.
I am.
And the title is Longevity Blueprint for Health, Wealth, and Purpose, Embracing the Rest of Your Life. What inspired you to write this book? At what point did you say, I need to write a book?
I realized that I could not have enough conversations with people and let people
Mm,
know how important it is for them to plan ahead. And I listened to a somebody talk about the amount of homelessness that is expected to happen in our older population, and it is scary.
sad,
The
sad. Yeah,
the fastest growing age group of homelessness is in our 55 and above, and it's growing significantly. Over the last few years, it's grown like 5%, which it doesn't sound like a lot, but when you go
but it
from
is.
14 to 18%, that is a lot.
It is.
And so we need to do something about it. And so basically what happens or what it boils down to is um, when you have a couple, and we know women's life expectancy is higher than men's. I think it's an 82 versus 78. And so the likelihood that one of the couple is going to have a medical crisis is it's just statistically very high.
Yes,
And when that occurs, what'll happen is many of them will look at their assets and say, "Oh my goodness, a lot of my money is in the equity in my home." And so then they will proceed to call a real estate agent and say, "Hey, I need to sell my home because I need to put my spouse into a assisted living facility,
absolutely. Mhm.
and I'm going to go in with them." And then what ends up happening is the moment you sell that house, you no longer have homestead protection on that money. And that means that creditors can come out of the woodwork to try to get that money.
Uh,
And it, yeah, and then in addition to that, there are rules related to when Medicaid kicks in
yes,
and how you qualify for Medicaid. And so if you do the appropriate financial planning and you have the appropriate mechanisms in place, which we have access to a variety of them. If you talk to a attorney that specializes in elder law and estate planning, they will provide you with really good counseling for your specific scenario because each scenario is different.
yes. Mhm.
Um, so it's important to talk to them and consider all of the implications of how you plan because Medicaid, when you start having to use it, will look back 5 years to see where you've used your assets, to see where they can go
Oh,
recover that. So, as a quick example, let's say you say, "Well, I'm going to put my house in my children's name." because that way I'll appear to have less money and Medicaid will kick it in sooner. Well, it doesn't work that way because Medicaid has 5 years to look back. And if you just did that 2 years ago before you had your stroke, then they can go back to your children and say, hey, that house needs to come back to us to pay for your
Oh,
parents' care,
oh,
right? Yes. Oh, so you have to plan ahead.
yes,
And my big concern is that unfortunately, the spouse that had this medical crisis, which usually is a fall, a stroke, a heart attack, or maybe
yes.
diagnosed with a terminal illness like a cancer, they're going to survive anywhere from 3 to 5 years. But the spouse that usually ends up caregiving for them, if they don't end up dying early because of the caregiving stress, they will tend to outlive the spouse by another 10 or even 15 years. And
Wow.
if you spend all of your collective wealth on taking care of one person, the only thing left for the other person is whatever Social Security check is coming in. And that usually, unfortunately, is not enough.
Isn't much.
It
No.
isn't much. I mean, that's the reality. And so I saw this situation, and actually I didn't just see it. I lived it. So let me explain. So I was married to my first husband in my early 20s.
Sure,
And a year into our marriage, he ended up with a blood clotting disorder. And because of this blood clotting disorder, all of a sudden, I'm working on my doctorate, just working a part-time job. He's working full-time. We're living off my student loans and what we're both making.
sure.
And he gets told he cannot work for 6 months.
Oh,
Yeah, that's his recovery. And then over the next 6 years, we go in and out of hospitals for, well, the 6 years. At year 4, they completely disable him. Year 3, if I back up to that, the medication that he was on was no longer working. So they had to try to find some other solution. Well, they just had approved a drug, which that was really exciting, but we didn't know if our insurance was going to cover it. Well, the insurance
or it was
covered.
like $6,000 a pill or something, huh?
Well, yeah, I mean, what it ended up being is it ended up being 80% of my full-time job. So it took 80% of the money I made on my full-time job just to cover that one medication after insurance kicked in their part. And so I'm working 2 part-time jobs and a full-time job to make ends meet. And it was all because I made $500 too much in
Oh,
my
no.
full-time job to be able to get any kind of assistance on it. Because if
Oh,
not, they would have dropped it to where it was less than 5% of what I earned, which that was doable. But
sure.
so so I've been personally in that situation in which I've had to figure out the system and figure out how to survive. And I've also made lots of bad decisions in that process. Like it would have been a better decision for me to take a $500 pay cut than to take on 2 additional jobs. I would have been better
Oh,
off. I would have had more money.
sure, of course.
But
But our mind says, I need to work harder,
yes, I
right?
need to
Because we've
work
been
harder.
raised that way, right? You've been raised, right. Well,
Yeah,
I need to work more. Okay, I'll just go earn another $500, right?
exactly. We go into survival mode
Sure,
and
sure.
then you don't think straight. And
No,
so because of what I learned and experienced through that, I'm like, okay, I was in my 20s. I have my whole, another 35 years of work life to be able to
absolutely.
regain everything that I lost.
Absolutely.
But people who are 65, 75, and 80
I
years old,
don't.
if you're faced with that, you're done. I mean, you can't recover.
No,
And so
no.
my passion for making sure that one medical crisis does not become a devastating financial crisis because my goodness, you're already dealing with all the emotions related to this
Absolutely.
and change in life. Your life has completely changed overnight. That it is important to plan ahead and also take steps to make yourself the healthiest you can so that if you do end up having a situation happen, you have the best opportunity to bounce back healthier. So that's why I wrote the book is to really help get that message out to people. And the truth of the matter is, when you have a baby, everybody comes and tells you, oh, do this, do that, because babies don't come with manuals. But adults, you have an aging parent and nobody wants to talk about, oh, have you know about adult briefs, the incontinence, we don't want to
No,
talk about it. Or have you ever bathed an adult? All these things are not things people want to talk about.
no.
And so we don't
No,
have,
we know that, and I see in the blogs and in the groups that we see on Facebook and so on, people talk about their challenges. And they say, I mean, after all, my mom bathed me when I was a baby, so I really shouldn't be embarrassed to do that, but yet we are, we don't want to have to go through those things.
yeah. And it's more than that. There's a whole bunch of like psychology involved in that. And then just the fact that, okay, so according to an AARP study, there's 38 million people who are, or 38 million hours worth of caregiving that are unpaid annually, you know? And the reality is,
I
if
get
you
it.
don't, yeah, yeah. Yeah, unfortunately, I am a retired go-to kid. So I was one of the kids that had to do caregiving. Um, and so I understand. I've been there. And the the problem is, if the older adult does not do some planning and we don't communicate what our desires are, then we as children end up in a situation in which we don't know what to do with mom or dad or how best to support them,
No, we don't. We
right?
don't. And
We
I was
don't.
thinking about that and getting ready for our call today. And I think the other thing is that we, and I'm a little bit older than you are probably, but we didn't grow up thinking that we needed to plan for our parents to be 100.
Right.
Okay. And my mom is 104. She's going to be 105 in October,
Wow.
lives by herself, completely independent. Nothing's wrong with her except she has a bad knee. Nothing's wrong with my mom. And we just didn't think about that.
Mhm.
When my dad was sick, we found ourselves in a situation that the hospital made him go out and leave. So we had to put him in a kind of a rehab center for a couple of weeks. And then they called and said, you've got to move him. And we put him in a board and care home. We said, well, okay, we can handle this if he lives a few months, but if he lives here a couple years, we can't afford this, right?
Right.
And
Yep.
unfortunately, he passed away in less than a month there, so it wasn't an issue. But I made me think, I can't be the only person in this situation, right? I can't be the only child of an aging parent who's going through this, and it just never occurred to me. And so, like a lot of these things we find, Karina, are when people get the call, right? You get the
Right.
call, and then you find yourself in this situation. So
Yeah.
I'm sure that your book will be a real asset, and we want to make sure at the end of this recording, at the end of the show today, that everyone knows how they can get it. So I
Thank you.
love your quote that you have the building blocks within you to become everything you want to be. You just need a little bit of help to unlock all the amazing potential that you have. Was there a specific event or experience that inspired you? And let me just read it again to our viewers and our listeners. You have the building blocks within you to become everything you want to be. You just need a bit of help to unlock all the amazing potential you have. So where did that come from?
I think it came from the fact that because I was that 5'9" young kid or teen among those 5 foot nothing other teens that were not very nice to me, um, I grew up with kind of low self-esteem. Okay,
Oh,
really low to no self-esteem, right? But I always realized that there was there was more to me than what these people were saying or thinking I was, right? And the reality is that every time you meet somebody, they get an impression of you. And then you meet
yes.
somebody else, they get a different impression of you. And they may actually think two totally different things about you, right? And when I came to college, I had a professor, Dr. Jenkins, and he talked to us about something he called the wheel of perception. And so
Okay.
this one day he showed up, drew on the board a wagon wheel, and this wagon wheel had yeah, all the spokes, and he put a dog in the middle of the wagon wheel, and on one spoke he put a little boy, and he starts telling the story. He says, okay, this little boy, he absolutely loves this dog because this dog is his best friend. And then there's his sister who doesn't like the dog because, she was much younger, and this dog just came out bouncing out of nowhere and knocked her over, and she scraped her knee, so she doesn't like the dog. And mom, she's got mixed feelings about the dog because um well, she loves the fact the little boy loves the dog, but she doesn't like having to chase everybody to feed the dog and clean up after the dog.
Yeah,
And
of
then
course not.
yeah, and dad loves the dog because, the dog takes care of his family and it's his hunting buddy. And the neighbor doesn't like him because he's always barking hello to him. And then the cat hates the dog because every time she's about to pounce on that little bird, then the dog comes out of nowhere. And of course, the bird sees the dog as a savior. But the thing is, did the dog change? It's the same dog. Well,
Yes.
we're like that. We're the same person. And we have within us the ability to become anything and everything we want to be. And so that's where the building blocks came from. And sometimes you just need that one person like Dr. Jenkins, who not only showed us that you can change your perception about anything, including yourself, that can totally open that door to the opportunity for you to explore a totally different you and a totally different reality for yourself. So,
Well, that's great. And we're glad you shared that. We know, Karina, that you love research. A lot
I
of your
do.
work is data and it's research and it's reading and it's education. And what have been your favorite projects and what impact have they had on your life and your work with aging and older people?
Wow. Okay. So, one of the projects that I had an opportunity to work on was reworking the strategic plan for obesity prevention for the state of Texas. And
Wow.
that was fascinating because I got to interview over 100 experts in obesity, everything from doctors to people who did health promotion to economists and strategists. And so that allowed me to put together all these amazing strategies that could be done at various different levels. So by levels, I mean churches could do certain activities,
Uh-oh.
hospitals could do different activities, and so on. And so there were different uh, activities for each different group to be able to do to kind of provide support to that ecosystem. And
Right.
so that was a very unique experience to be able to pull all that data together and get all of them working on the same page. And then the other one that was really fascinating was working with the Centers for Disease Control on developing something called the System Dynamic Model for Cardiovascular Disease Prevention. And so that one, unlike a model, which is like written on paper where you have, physical activity and maybe nutrition and their impact on cardiovascular disease prevention,
Mhm.
this was actually a computerized model with data behind it that you could take these levers and say, okay, well, if my community can focus on physical activity and I can increase the impact and have more people be physically active, either through policies or programs, then what would be the impact on cardiovascular disease incidence and death? And you could do the same thing for like air pollution and nutrition
Right.
and access to healthcare and so on. And because it was this dynamic model, a community could actually take it and say, well, based on what we have the capacity to do, this is what kind of an impact we could have at a
Mm.
community-wide level. And so
And,
that
and
was
going
fascinating.
and kind of going back to the blue zones idea, right?
Hmm.
Right. That's
Yeah,
fascinating. Yeah, and I
yeah.
would love to go, I'd love to see the outcome of some of those studies if you did it,
Hmm.
10 years ago or 5 years ago, and if people have adopted those
Yeah,
policies or those practices and what the impact has been. I'm sure that would be really
right.
interesting.
Well, I actually took the system dynamics model to our community here in Austin, Texas, and we had about 70 different organizations who came
Uh-huh.
in to learn about the model. And then together we agreed to collaborate on two different major strategies. And then as a result of that, I wrote up a paper of all this community mobilization that we did.
Uh-huh.
And it was published in the Health Promotion Journal. And about a year after it was published, I got a call from the editor, and they were calling to let me know that they awarded me the paper of the year.
Well, good for you.
So
Congratulations. That's
thank
great.
you.
Yeah,
So
it's excellent.
it was very exciting project to work on, and I never expected that. And that was based on the work that was done and the result and the impact that it had. So it's definitely it's had a huge impact. And they've taken that model and put it into 5 different data from 5 different communities, and now they use it nationwide.
Well, good for them and
Yeah,
good for you.
thank you.
You quote also an interesting quote that I saw is that you quote that 13.9% of homes in the West, South, Central United States are ready to meet our aging needs. What does that really mean? And what can people do about it, if anything? So let me just repeat this quote, this statistic. Less than 13.9% of homes in the West, South Central US are ready to meet our aging needs. Let's talk about it.
Okay. So when you look at all of the homes that are available, they're looking for homes that are easy to get into. So basically, homes that have like 0 steps to get into the house, or maybe just have 1 step where you can easily put a ramp in. And they're just looking at the front of the house. It doesn't really matter. If you have steps for the garage, that does not disqualify that house.
Okay.
But they're looking at that. They're looking at having hallways that are wide enough. And most people don't realize, but when we look at universal design or thinking about a home where you may have to age in place and may end up in a wheelchair, then you're going to need a radius of about 5 feet to be able to turn in. So you can't have a
Okay.
90-degree hallway, right? Because then it's very
Right.
hard to be able to turn that wheelchair to get it down the hallway.
Right.
Or, for example, when I moved my mother in the last time to my house, one of the challenges that I had was her walker was 18 and a half inches wide, and the door to the bathroom was 18 inches wide. So
Oh,
yeah, so half an inch meant she could not take that walker into that bathroom. And so they're looking at things like that. Is the door to the bathroom wide enough? Do you have the ability to access the toilet with space like on one side, right? So if you need assistance, you can get in that way. And so basically what it means is homes that are ready today and safe today for people to be able to age in them. That's it, 13.9%. Now, it seems like, okay, well, maybe we have enough, right? But
no,
no,
we
because
don't.
by 2030, 20% of our population will be 65 or above. And so if 13.9% of our homes is all that's available, even though there are couples, that makes it a deficiency in the number of homes that we have. Now, some of the homes can be modified. I mean, if you have 2 or 3 steps getting into your house, you can still put in a ramp,
Sure.
or or you can put in a handrail. Nowadays, handrails are required if you have more than 2 steps. And so there are things that can help make your home better, but the hardest one to modify and the most expensive one is the bathroom.
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
if you need to be able to wheel in a wheelchair into a bathroom so somebody can maybe transfer to a chair to get a bath, then that's a really big remodel. And
You
so a
know, it's
better thing to do is to, find a place that is more appropriate
it's
for you.
interesting because my mom lives in a 55 plus community. All right. So we
Yeah,
moved to there. She sold one home and we moved to there just to rent for a while. And she kept, then we moved to there and she kept saying, but this isn't designed for older people. I said,
that's right.
Mom, it's a 55 plus community. What do you mean? Right?
Mhm.
Because you would
Right.
think because it's a 55 plus community, that means automatically by name, it's designed for that. But in fact, just like you said, she has a small entrance into her bathroom, the
Mhm.
commode and the tub, and she has to basically climb around or over the toilet to get to turn on the shower, or she climbs in the tub and
Mhm.
turns on the water and waits for it to get warm while cold water's washing on her,
Yeah,
right? And
yeah.
all of a sudden I realized just because it's a 55 plus community doesn't mean it's meant for people who are, of course, there are very many people my mom's age, but still, even if they're 80 or 90 or 100, It's the same point.
It is. And I mean, and you have to realize, I guess, that some of the people who are going to live in the community for at least from 55 to 75 won't have any problems navigating a normal house. But when you get after 75, then that's when you start to have some of the mobility challenges, and then the home
Absolutely.
is no longer going to work. Yeah,
Right.
one of my favorite experiences was going in to look at the model homes in a new 55 and up community.
Oh, I'll bet that was good.
Yeah, and I walk into the first one and I'm greeted by this beautiful straight staircase going up to the second floor, and I'm like, "Oh, they're trying to kill us."
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Because the worst thing you can do for an aging person is give them a straight staircase with no landing, because you're going to go straight down.
Yeah.
If you lose
Absolutely.
your balance, and I don't know about you, but I wear transition lenses. And when I'm wearing
Oh,
my glasses instead of my contacts and
mhm.
I'm going down those stairs, my depth perception is completely off. It's almost like I'm having a trip or something, because the floor seems to even like move at times. And it's just dangerous to have the combination of a staircase that doesn't have a landing and transitional lenses, which unfortunately are a must at some of our ages.
Absolutely. We only have a few more minutes, and I do want to talk about, I'm going to ask you if you were in, and we've talked about some of this today, but if you were in the living room with our viewers and our listeners, and I know you do a lot of public speaking, so you have the opportunity to do this, what would you want them to know? You talk about, do you accept or decline the call when the call comes? I think you've accepted the call for serving seniors, but what
Mhm.
would you want them to know? What are your future plans? You've written your book. What do you hope to accomplish in your life yet to go? And we have about 2 minutes.
Well, what I hope, or my next step after I get this book out and start promoting it, is to write a second book, which is targeted more at the go-to kid, who's going to be the
That's
caregiver,
us.
so
That's us,
that
you and I.
yeah, so that there's a companion, where we can learn about the aging perspective from the point of view of trying to balance our own life.
Absolutely
Because the reality is we have to balance our own life. And if we
do.
start making choices of becoming an unpaid caregiver, that is huge financial implications for us. And if we have to contribute financially, well, that has financial implications for our own retirement.
It
And then
does.
our children may end up having to help us out too. And so really being able to understand kind of all the ins and outs and implications. And so being able to ask the questions and think about what is the best overall approach, because we have to consider everybody in the equation. And we want to be loving and respectful, but everybody's life is just as valuable. And we can't just put our life on hold for to take care of our loved ones. We think it's more of we've got to project manage and ensure that they are safe, but we don't necessarily have to own doing everything ourselves. And so it's finding
No.
that balance and
And
being
that is,
free to
yep.
be okay with that.
And that's absolutely a big challenge, absolutely a huge challenge. And we need to talk about that some more. Where can our guests find you, and where can they get a hold of your new book?
Okay, so the new book is going to go on Amazon and Audible. I've discovered everything comes after the writing is so much harder and
Oh,
unpredictable. And my website is drkarina.com. That is drkarina.com. I haven't revamped it in a while, so bear with it, but I will get more information up there for you.
and I'm sure
That's the
you'll
best
have
way to reach me.
I'm sure you'll have the new book. Thank you, Dr. Karina Loyo, PhD, for
Thank
being
you.
with us today on Always Ageless with Valerie V. We're so excited and so honored that you chose to be with us, especially your pre-book launching. So we'll be sure to have you come back and talk to us again after your book is out. We can promote it and give some to some of our listeners. And we want to thank our listeners and remind you to please come back again for our next episode of Always Ageless, where we celebrate life at any age. And we want to give you the empowerment, the energy, and the education information you need so that you can live your life to your fullest. Thank you very much, Dr. Karina.
Thank you, Valerie, for having me.
Bye-bye.